Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Pramesti Duchayani, and here I want to present about Introduction to Psycholinguistics material, which talks about language and thought. We can see that there are several main topics about language and thought. The first is about language, the second is about thought, the next is about relationship of language and thought, and the last is about language and thought by experts. Let's begin with the first main topic, which is about definitions of language. Definitions of language can be taken from two experts. They are Deacon and then Bloch and Traeger. The first is from Deacon, 1997. Deacon states that language is our unique and complex mode of communication and argues that it is a fact that language is an unprecedented form of naturally evolved communications. In other words, Dickens means that, according to Dickens, language is a unique, complicated, or complex form of our communication that has never been seen before. And next is from Bloch and Traeger, 1942. They state that a language is a system of arbitrary vocal symbols by means of which a social group cooperates. In other words, a language is a system of arbitrary vocal symbols that used by a social group to communicate with others. The next is about thought. The definition of thought can be from two main terms, which is any mental activity and about intellectual activity. So thought is content of two activity. In conclusions, thought is any mental or intellectual activity involving an individual's subjective consciousness. In other words, thought is our mental and intellectual activity that involving an individual's or our subjective consciousness. And the last is about relationship of language and thought. Relationship of language and thought can be taken from two experts, which are Vygotsky and from the Safer-Whorf hypothesis. According to Vygotsky, 1986, there are two interacting pairs. The first is speech is involved in most thought and thought is involved in most speech. For example, there are aspects of thoughts like emotions, anger, joy, and disgust. Those emotions or those are aspects of thought can only be discussed verbally, but they are not verbal in nature. And the last is from the Safer-Whorf hypothesis. The Safer-Whorf hypothesis talks about two kinds of linguistics. The first is linguistics relativisms, and the second is linguistics determinisms. Linguistics relativisms means that a different language encode different categories that influence the perceptions of the world. It means that a different language is a different concept. For example, there is a term riverside in England, and for a British or in England, riverside has positive meanings or positive context, such as riverside is beautiful, riverside is multifunctions, and riverside is clean. In contrast, it is different for Indonesia. In Indonesia or in Bahasa Indonesia, riverside means pinggir sungai that has negative meanings or negative context, such as riverside is dirty, smelly, and the source of disease. Those are the difference in representing of the terms riverside. And the last is linguistics determinisms. Linguistics determinism means that the language we speak determines how we perceive the world, how we perceive the object or thing. The example is there's a grammatical gender. The example is between German speakers and Spanish speakers, they are represent the word bridge in different meanings. Like for German speakers, bridge has feminine meaning or feminine context, such as bridge is pretty, beautiful, peaceful, and elegant. In contrast, for Spanish speakers, bridge has masculine meaning, such as bridge is towering, strong, and dangerous. It is depends on grammatical gender. So those are the difference of between linguistic relativism and linguistic determinism. I think that's all from my presentations. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.